Okay, guys, this is the notes for the Unit 1, 2. Our first unit's combined, so it's going to be called Unit 1 and 2. And today we're just going to focus on how to evaluate functions, actually plug numbers in. We're going to talk about something called composition, which is where we're putting one function inside of another. And we're going to talk about piecewise functions, which is where we have little parts of functions and we're only allowed to plug in certain values into each one. I'm going to make the video focus more from technology point of view than by hand, okay? So when you look at my notes, you'll see some things worked out by hand, but on the video, I'm going to show you how to use the calculator to get a lot of these values. So when we're talking about making a like f of a number or g of a number, all that means is we're taking that number and we're substituting in for wherever we see x. So you see a lot of different functions here, and some of them you might not know. So we'll talk about what all those mean. This is a fraction. This also means divided by. So you can do that as a fraction or divided by. But I want to show you something about how to actually use your store feature to plug in numbers for x. So before we do that, if I wanted to evaluate this function, I would need to first evaluate the top and the bottom. Our calculators have a fraction menu. So if you press alpha y equals, it's going to pull up a menu that says n over d, un over d. Pick that first option, and you can actually have it mimic a fraction. I don't know if you can see that very well, so let's move it in a little bit. So I can say 3, but I don't want to put x in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 3, and I'm going to substitute parentheses -8 for x. That's going to give me -2. What that means is 3 times -8, which is -24, plus 12, which is -12, all divided by 6. -12 divided by 6 is -2. It does all the order of operations for you if you put it in correctly. So you can get the answer without having to do work. You can also do something called store. So let's say when I press X here on my calculator, it might have some random number, okay? Yours might say 0. If you press X and then press enter, it might say 0. That's because your calculator memory's default value for X is 0. But you can have any number stored in X. So if I want to store, say, -8 for X, and do this with me, please. I'm going to type in -8, and I'm going to do this STO right to the left of 1 and below 4. That's going to put an arrow. And when I can store any number for any variable, but when I want to store that for x, I'm going to put -8 arrow x, and I'm going to press enter. Now every time I press x, that value is -8. So the usefulness of that is, all right, if I press clear, I can actually type in exactly what I see. So if I do a fraction, alpha y equals, I can type in 3x plus 12 divided by 6. And there's your -2. So now every time I press x, it's -8. And I can do that with this too. I could do 2 parentheses -8 squared minus 3 parentheses -8 plus 7. Close it up, subtract 18. But I could also do, since I have -8 stored for x, I could do 2x squared minus 3 parentheses x plus 7, close it up, minus 18. And there's a 113. So what did we get? We got -2, 113. What does that mean? This is absolute value. If you don't remember, absolute value means take whatever you evaluate inside of these bars, and if it's positive, keep it positive. If it's negative, change it to positive. So absolute value is always positive. So what this really is doing is it's going to evaluate what's inside the parentheses first. If I want to plug in -8, I'm going to say 6 times -8 plus 20 first inside of the absolute value bars. And when I evaluate that, that's a negative 28. Absolute value says make it positive. So that's going to be 28 minus 45, which is going to become negative again because when you subtract 28, 45, you get negative 17. That's great, but we can still use the absolute value and the store features from our calculator. Here's how you get absolute value. Write this down. It's math. You got a math button over here. It's right here below alpha. Press it. Go over to number. In the first option, ABS is absolute value. Okay? So let's write that down. Math, ABS. So now, since I now still have negative 8 stored in for x, I'm going to type in what I see. 6x plus 20. Right arrow out of that absolute value and put minus 45. There's your negative 17. Or if you don't feel comfortable typing x, you could do the old use parentheses and get it that way too. Because remember, x is not negative 8 by default. We had to store that in there. So it required a little bit of effort. Same thing over here. This is not a power. This 3 in that what we, you're used to seeing a square root sign, but that's a radical symbol, and that just means the cube root. That means what number times itself 3 times is going to get you a certain value. So the cube root is, if I think about negative 8, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 gives you negative 8. That means negative 2 is the cube root of negative 8. We can evaluate the cube root by going into the math menu and going down to 4. So if I want the cube root of negative 8, that's going to get me negative 2. So that's going to be, write this down, math 4 cube root. So since we know what that is, we can evaluate this since we have negative 8 stored in for x. So we're gonna, we have the 4 times, that little dots of times, and to get the cube root, we're gonna do the math. Go down here. And remember, we still have negative 8 stored in for x, so you can either type in x, or you could do negative 8. It's up to you. And then that square goes on the outside of the parentheses. You see how that's right there? So that should give you negative 128. So take a minute to pause the video. And now that you know where all this stuff is, see if you can attempt the 4 problems down here with this fraction, this combination of square roots, cube root, square, cubes, absolute value. See if you can do all that. And then after you've tried them, unpause it and check it with me. Okay, hopefully you got a chance to try it. Remember that to store a number, you type it first. Press this button, STO. It's going to put an arrow up there and press X. Now you have all your X's to give you negative 27. I'm going to type that in as I see it. So I'm going to do alpha y equals negative 5x plus 7 over 2. Answer 71. Over here, it's going to be x squared plus 800, and there's no symbol between it, but that means times. So 800 math down cube root x negative 1671. Eight parentheses 5 minus x close parentheses 2 power right here, 2 the third power. Right arrow once you get out of there to get back into the main line, minus 359x squared. We're done, 433. See how easy this is? And you don't have to do anything but type stuff in your calculator. Our last one, 2x minus 5 times math num ABS, absolute value, 3x plus 50, negative 209. All right, that's going to conclude the first example of the notes. So the next video should show composition of functions, example 2. Thanks for watching.